podcast that you're about to listen to may cause some listeners to contemplate the difference between wisdom and intelligence.
Well, hey there, happy innovators. How are you guys doing today? I hope you're doing well. I'm doing pretty good. You know, the other night I was winding down my evening, getting ready to go to sleep, and, right before my head hit the pillow, I was thinking about the Singularity Podcast and, kind of like reflecting on it and the possible impact that some of the things I say might have on people or not, and, should I continue with it? And, what should I do next? And, all these things, they come into my mind periodically over the years. Every so often I'll think, maybe I'll stop. And then I'll get inspired and I'll do another one. It's not uncommon for me to kind of like reflect and take stock of where everything is and how things are going, But like I said, right before my head hit the pillow, I had this revelation about my podcast, because I spend a lot of my time day to day, I spend a lot of my time, my hours alone. My wife is working and I'm here in my studio and I work all day long in my studio, and I handle the domestic stuff around the house too and all that, which I love to do. I don't mind. And I was thinking about how it's kind of like with this podcast, the people that are listening to my podcast, and especially the ones who comment, are really in some ways, some of the only friends that I really have. And that's kind of strange because I haven't met them. I haven't met you, my happy innovators, but, just the way my life has gone, I find myself in a place where a lot of my friends and the people that I really relied on are dead. They're gone. They're not here anymore. And I was thinking about that, how strange, the podcast, the Singularity Podcast is actually like a way for me to communicate thoughts to people, but it's remotely, you're not in the room with me. You're somewhere else and you're going to hear this later, but you are going to hear my thoughts. If you were in the room with me right now sitting here, this is probably what we would be talking about, And I thought, wow, that's kind of both weird and kind of interesting at the same time, And I've thought this before, But the difference was this time, right before my head hit the pillow, I had another thought. And the other thought was this: that maybe, and I'm not sure, but maybe for some of the people that are listening to this podcast right now, I may be one of the only voices that some of you people out there, my happy innovators, that some of you actually hear. And maybe even for some of you, my voice is the only friendly voice you're going to hear today. That could be the case. And I never thought about that before, as far as I can remember. And I really kind of thought about it. It was kind of like one of those things that made me open my eyes wide open while I'm laying in bed, sitting there thinking about it. Whoa, that is a pretty big thing to think about. I guess it's like this. Sometimes I think with this podcast that, I'm talking about things that are weird or they're nonsensical, or does it even really matter what I'm saying, or am I saying anything that anybody needs to hear, or am I saying anything that's really important, And A lot of the time I would say probably not, you know, but maybe, just maybe, that's the point with this podcast. You know, I'm not the most intelligent. I don't have a new theme every time I talk. I don't always have something interesting to talk about. Maybe the point of this podcast, literally, is communication between me and you, the people that are listening right now, whether we ever meet or not, or whether we're ever actually friends or we even talk to each other ever, no matter what, even if we never do, it matters that I make a podcast for you to listen to. You follow what I'm saying? Like, just as this is important for me to talk to someone, okay, it's just as important for some of you to be talked to. And maybe that's what the Singularity Podcast really is a place for me to talk to you, and for me to talk for you, and for you to listen to me talk. That's it. It doesn't matter what I'm talking about. It doesn't matter how old I am, how smart I am, how dumb I am, how rich or poor I am. I am just another voice for you. That's it. And you know, like, my intentions are good. I never say anything threatening or negative or dark or anything. I try to remain positive, and you know that. Whenever you listen to me, there's a certain amount of security with what I'm saying and how I'm saying it and where I'm coming from. And while that may not seem like a big deal to some people, I think it might actually be pretty important to all of us. Maybe there should be some podcasts that aren't, trying to get money out of your wallet for listening to me talk. It's always free. There is no cost. There's nothing. There are no strings attached to this conversation. And I guess what I would say is, if you hear me and you feel me and what I'm saying right now, maybe let me know in the comments. I like that. And I'm finding that as time goes by, I actually feel like I kind of need those comments. I need them a little bit more. You know, I need to know that this is not all for nothing. You know what I mean? And we're in this together. You know, I felt inspired today to do a podcast, and it's going to be a little bit weird, I guess, but it's also going to require like a little bit of setup, story-wise, so I want you to just bear with me. Okay, when I was young, I was born into a pretty large family, and we were a Catholic family, okay? And I would say that we were both culturally Catholic and, religiously Catholic. I mean, it was something that everyone in my family, cousins, aunts, uncles, parents, brothers, sisters, everyone took very seriously. And all of the great, people in my life, the people that were the smartest or the best or the greatest, they were all religious, spiritual people. And I was just a little kid, and I remember that, And so I was raised in this culture of spirituality that, like, I never had any problem with. Now, some of my brothers and sisters, like, as we got older, or cousins, or, whatever, a lot of them kind of drifted away, for one reason or another. Everybody has their story, but I never had a moment of doubt or any of that. I always just believed in God. I always just believed what the Bible said, and I always just believed what I was taught by my parents and my family and my teachers at school, because I went to a Catholic school. So, I was a young person, but I was spiritual, and I actually enjoyed my spirituality and my religion. and I still do, okay? But the reason I'm bringing that up is because as I got older and I went out into the world and met other kids and other families, and I kind of saw how things were in other people's houses, I realized that not everybody was raised the same way that I was. And I just kind of noticed it. Like with my younger friends, when, you know, I'm just a little kid, and my young friends, I would notice that they had kind of like a disrespect for not only my religion, but any kind of religion at all, especially anything related to Jesus and the Bible. Even when we were kids, there was this tone of hostility and a tone of disrespect to all the things that I believed in and all the things that I had kind of been built up with as a person. So, having said all that, okay, now you understand where I'm coming from. Like I said, I never had any doubt. I never had a moment when I questioned, like, is there a God? Or any, I don't even remember ever thinking that or asking myself that. I always just kind of believed. I think I was born with the belief. And you know, some may call that naivety, you know, like I was just naive, but I don't think so. I think it was a lot more complicated than that. And I think that ultimately, I still kind of believe the same things I did when I was a kid, and I kind of think I was on the right track. You know, thank God. Literally, thank God. So the other day I was watching some videos on YouTube while I was working in my studio, and I was watching a video by a guy named Tom Bilyeu, and you may or may not know him. You may have seen his videos or whatever. He's a pretty successful content creator. I think he's like a business owner. I'm not exactly sure what his deal is exactly, like if he was a gamer or he had like written or constructed a video game that was very successful and he made a lot of money, and now he's an entrepreneur and he does these, like, you know, inspirational talks, and he has a podcast. And I was watching him do one of his inspirational talks, and the name of this talk that he was giving was, "You have 2 years, then everything changes. The death of the content creator." And he was basically talking about in this video that you can watch on YouTube. I'll leave the link to it down below in the description for this podcast. You know, he's talking about the future of AI. And, you know, I'll listen because I'm a content creator, I guess. And I'm kind of curious to see what the smart people have to say. And he's definitely very intelligent. That goes without saying, it's apparent. But intelligence is not wisdom. And throughout this talk that he was given on YouTube, he kind of was saying that he imagines a time in the future when there will be a split in society with people who are willing to augment their bodies with technology and the people who refuse to do that. And he made some kind of, you know, remark or some kind of allusion to the idea of like the people who opt out of that technology in their body thing will be like the Amish people are today. Now, if you've listened to anything I've spoken about over the past 10 years on this podcast, then you already know how I feel about the Amish people. And to be honest with you, I think that they have it right, maybe even a little bit more than we do. And there's a part of me, there's a part of me that is always actively trying to get my life a little bit closer to them than it is to Tom Bilyeu. So I don't mind being considered a dinosaur or a Luddite or, you know, living in the Stone Age. I don't care about that stuff. I think it's a matter of like quality of life. And I'll tell you what, I don't know how you feel, but this is how I feel. Newer is not better, okay? And all you need to do is like compare the modern day music streaming services to a good old fashioned hard copy CD or a vinyl album or a cassette tape. There is this reversion of people going back to those older formats because they realize that the newer formats suck, okay? Newer is not better. And that's probably like the line of demarcation between me, an artist like me, and a content creator like me, and somebody like Tom Bilyeu. And I wanted to talk about it because it ties into what I was saying about my earlier formation as a child, as a kid, and the things that I would hear about in the Bible and the way that I was treated by other people outside of my family, or I saw, when I saw how things were done at somebody else's house and how there was no religion in their house. And I didn't think too much of it at the time and everything, but I noticed it. Okay. And, I was thinking about, as I'm listening to Tom Bilyeu talk about this idea of people augmenting their bodies with, AI and electronics and, Neuralinks and all that stuff, like literally putting something into your brain, that kind of like affects you personally, maybe augments you, can make a copy of your personality or allow you to exist in some other dimension, some other place that's not Earth, not tactile, not here. It's somewhere else, a virtual world. And it just made me think about this passage from the Bible that I've heard over and over again throughout my life that never really made too much sense to me until right now. Okay, and I'm going to read you the Bible passage that I'm referring to. It's from Revelation chapter 9, verse 6. And it says something like this. And in those days men shall seek death, and they shall not find it. And they shall desire to die, and death shall flee from them. Now, when I first heard that, like when I was a kid, that didn't really seem to make too much sense to me. There was this idea that, people would want to die, but they would not be able to. They would be in a space or in a condition somehow when people would want to die, they would long for death, but they would not be able to die. And I hear this guy, Tom Bilyeu, talking about this, human augmentation, people taking on these devices or these contraptions, these things literally into their biology and marrying technology with their biology. And in a way that would allow them to, create their own world and their own existence and maybe like in effect, never really have to die. And it sounds an awful lot like that Bible passage, doesn't it? And I gotta tell you the honest truth, like when I hear this guy, Tom Bilyeu, talking about that and encouraging, this audience of people, and his audience is huge, encouraging them to follow him into this place where the human body is no longer what we know it as today. It becomes something else. It becomes, no longer something organic. It becomes something that's half technology, half organic. And you can imagine a time where people would be putting themselves into a situation that at first seems like really interesting and magnificent. That you can enter literally in every sense of your body. You could enter into another space that maybe you've created or somebody else created for you to go into and exist in. and it would be eternal. There would be no end to that existence. But like I said, going back to that scripture verse, that small little phrase, and I'll read it to you again, okay? And in those days men shall seek death and shall not find it, and they shall desire to die, and death shall flee from them. So there will be these people who kind of, like, in my opinion, get suckered into this idea of augmenting their bodies and their personalities and their brains with these devices that somebody else made and put into their brains in the hopes that they would be living in this Shangri-La, this world, this perfect world that they've created or somebody else created. But once they get in, okay, once they're drawn in, what if they can't get out? You know what I mean? Like, even if that world that they escape to virtually, you know, with this new brain they have, this new way of transmitting sensations and memories into something electronic, they get there and they like it at first, but then they want to go back to what they used to be, and they can't. They're trapped. So in the Bible, it also talks about how these people that are trying to die, they want to die, but death flees from them. How they will be cast into the lake of fire still alive. Okay? And that never made sense to me either. What would be how could that be? If someone was going to go to hell or heaven or anything that I believe that we go to after we die, how could somebody go to hell or to heaven if they haven't died? But apparently that's possible. And according to Tom Bilyeu and the technological leaders of our time, that's possible. It's possible. They're telling you. And I feel so bad for these younger people and the people who were not raised in the way that I was and were not informed about these spiritual things that have nothing to do with intelligence, but they have everything to do with wisdom. And they are devoid of that. They have the intelligence, they have the knowledge and the technology and the brains to make amazing technological things, but they don't have the wisdom they'll need to decide whether they should be doing those things or not in the first place, you know, or the wisdom to know that not everything is about money or success, that there are more important things than money and success, and they will not be willing to forego that because they do not have the wisdom. And that wisdom comes from, in my opinion, my religion and my faith and the way that I was raised. The way my father raised me, the way my mother raised me, and the way my grandfather did, and my grandmother, and all of their friends, and all of my brothers and sisters and cousins, all of my family, all of us, we were all leading a lifestyle, however imperfect, because all Christians are imperfect, okay? But we were leading this existence that was as close to perfect as it could probably get. And all of us, everybody in my family, nobody has any excuses. We were all equipped with the wisdom. Maybe not the intelligence all the time, but we were all given the wisdom, the spiritual wisdom. And I wanted to make this podcast today for that reason, for those young people that are in the audience at this talk from Tom Bilyeu, and people that I'll never meet, I'll never see. My life will never affect their lives. And they would think I'm crazy anyway, or I'm stupid, or whatever they would say. And I don't care at all, you know. my heart breaks for them, and I'm afraid for them. I'm afraid for them being stuck in some state that they were tricked into entering into, never realizing that they probably shouldn't. They should run the other way, but they don't know that. And they'll never listen to me, and they'll never listen to you because they're very intelligent. They know more than everybody else does. And in my heart of hearts, I know that it's at their peril. And that's all I really wanted to say in this podcast. So, my happy innovators, remember this. If you want to keep what you've got to give it away. I love you one and all, and peace out, everybody. Take it easy. Okay, all you happy innovators that were kind enough and generous enough with your time to stick around to the end of the podcast for some music. And I'm going to share with you a song that is one of my personal favorites of mine. It's a song called Bomb Bomb Breakthrough. And my wife and I were listening to it in the car the other day, zipping down the freeway. We had the windows down and the stereo cranked, the wind blowing through our hair, and Bomb Bomb Breakthrough was just cranked, And it's one of those things, like when I hear that song, I gotta tell you the honest truth. I really can't believe that I wrote that song. I mean, it is so cool. I don't know where it came from, and man, I'll tell you, I smile from ear to ear when I hear that song. And so I wanted to share it today because it's a kick-ass song. It's called Bomb Bomb Breakthrough from the album The Wrench in the Rubicon. Let's check it out. See if you can enjoy it as much as I do. Bomb Bomb Breakthrough. One of my best moments in writing and recording music. Here we go.